Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to another day of quarantine school. In the news, we've got rumors that North Korea's leader, Kim Jong Un, has actually died. Is this true? We don't know for sure. The state-run newspaper, though, out of North Korea has presented a letter that he wrote, a thank you letter to some construction workers, and they're using that as evidence to show that he's not dead, he's still alive, and he's apparently writing letters. So we'll see. Why do we care? The big reason we care is because North Korea is considered a nuclear threat to the United States, and we don't have diplomatic relations with them. They are effectively at odds with the United States. So a change in leadership would potentially mean an improvement or a getting worse of relations between the two countries. So let's watch and see and find out what happens with that. I'm sure we'll know something in within the next couple of weeks. Okay, today's lesson, Reconstruction Plans. This week we're going to be all about Reconstruction Plans. We're going to go into Reconstruction next week also, because the way the Civil War ended was perhaps not the best way, and that we want to think about that. We want to look at how that could have been done differently. How would you do it? And so I want you to think about that. First of all, let's wrap up the Civil War. The Civil War ended with 620,000 deaths of Americans, and that counts both sides, the Union and the Confederates. The United States was still one country, so we got that going for us. The North won, the Union Army won, but you had 620,000 lives lost and then over 1 million casualties. Now, when we talk about casualties, and we'll talk about casualties in World War I and World War II also next year in high school anyway. Casualty means anybody who has been basically taken out of the fight. So that could be for being killed, but that could also be for a disease that's taken them out, or it could be for dismemberment. They lost an arm, or something that meant that they were no longer able to fight. That's what a casualty counts as. So for the Civil War, we had a lot of disease going around. Our medical skills were not so good at the time. So if you were injured and you were in an army hospital, you might not survive just for the infection you might get during that time period. All right, so as we look at the end of the Civil War, we have to think about what kind of war it was. It was not a war of conquest. We weren't trying to take over a new land with new people in it, like when we took over America from the Native Americans. That's not that kind of fight. It was also not a fight of defense. It wasn't like the American Revolution, where we were trying to get Britain to leave us alone, go back to your country, right? This was something where we were trying to keep one country together as a whole country. How can we make that happen? That's a tough question. Obstacles that are in the way. Okay, first obstacle we're going to talk about is slavery. Slavery is still a major factor here. Slavery was effectively ended by the end of the war, but we still have to deal with what are the rights of blacks. What is the representation of blacks? Can we make sure that if they are citizens of the United States, can we make sure that they are protected as citizens? And then the economy of cotton. This was a very slave-dependent economy, and if you don't have slaves anymore, how are you going to make sure that the economy of the South is still able to provide for its people? All right, next major factor is victory versus punishment. So, in a war, you kind of think that the winners get the rewards and the losers get the punishment. But do you do that in a civil war? Is that the best solution? Something to think about. Should the South be punished? What part of the South should be punished? Should everybody in the South be punished equally? Who decides the punishment? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Because if we do this the wrong way, it might happen again. Rebuilding a broken world, that's the next one, rebuilding it. This is a broken world in the sense that you have a southern economy that's damaged. They've stopped producing cotton to the level that they were before. The European countries that were buying cotton from them are starting to buy cotton from other places. Their fields are torn up and blown up, and houses and bridges destroyed, and train tracks that were there, and they didn't have many train tracks to begin with, but a lot of those have been destroyed. So they need to rebuild. We need to make sure that the slaves are able to become freedmen and find their way on their own as people of their own independence, and a lot of them don't know how. A lot of them haven't been educated. They don't have any reading skills. They don't know anything except for what they were taught on the plantations where they were working, and maybe they want to go do something else, but they may get stuck into a vicious trap where they have to go back and work for their former slave master as employers, effectively as slaves again, but under a different title. Is that what you want? That may not be the solution you're looking for. And then finally, how do slave owners become employers? That's another thing that they need to learn. Like, how do they handle paying somebody for what they used to get for free? And how do they manage that without falling into the same old trap of being a slave master instead of an employer? All right, so I want you to think about what your solution to the problem would be. So look back through these obstacles that we've run across and look in your textbook and read about some of the obstacles. This week we're going to look at several proposed solutions, and you're going to evaluate them. You're going to decide what was good about them, what was bad about them, and give me a proposal of how you would have done it differently. The three solutions we're going to investigate are Lincoln's 10% plan. That is the first one. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Radical Republican plan. That's the second one we're going to talk about. We'll do that one tomorrow. And Johnson's plan. That's the third one we're going to talk about. So today we'll talk about Lincoln's 10% plan. In 1863, Lincoln proposed the 10% plan. And remember, 1863, the war wasn't over yet. They didn't surrender until April of 1865. So he had a plan in place for the end of the war. If you guys want to end this war now, this is what the plan is going to be. It's really good when you're trying to end a war to have a plan in place for what are you going to do when they surrender, because you want to make sure that it happens smoothly and quickly and clearly so everyone knows what to expect. So in 1863, he announced a formal plan for Reconstruction. This was years before the Confederates surrendered in 1865. Number one, it was going to be amnesty for anyone who took an oath of loyalty to the United States. So if you were a member of the southern states and you wanted to be part of the Union again, we weren't going to hold you accountable and punish you. We were just going to, if you swear that you're going to be part of the United States and you're going to follow the laws that govern slavery, then we're going to have you back in. The second part of his plan was any high Confederate officials and military leaders that were part of the South would be excluded, at least at the beginning. At least at the beginning, they would not be part of rebuilding the South and setting up governments, things like that. And not really a punishment, but sort of a delay of you can't be part of this yet, a timeout. And then the third part is when 1/10, that's 10%, that's where we get the term 10% plan. When 1/10 of the number of voters were able to take that oath, then that whole state could launch its own government and elect representatives to Congress and be back in action. Again, that was not bringing slaves into it, we weren't bringing African Americans into it yet, but going back to whoever was able to vote in the 1860 election, you take that oath that you're pledging loyalty to the United States, and then you could be back and be part of the government again, and those states would start having their own self-determination, which we know is very important to them. Your goals for the day. Make sure you log into Schoology and Google Classroom. Get your attendance taken care of and take a look at what assignments I have for you in Google Classroom. Some of you are done with Fort Sumter and Civil War geography. That's great. Thank you. If you haven't finished those, please go in and do those. The next one is the Reconstruction Plans assignment. I'll be posting this a little bit later today. I don't have quite all the details worked out for it, but that's going to be where you're evaluating the different plans for Reconstruction and coming up with your own plan. Think about how you will solve the problems that remain. I'm put a link in the show notes for facts about North Korea based on the CIA's website. Hope you guys are doing well. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.